People said that once the Americans took off, the British planes would not escape. They said the American F-4 Phantom was too fast and too powerful to lose. On the American radar screens, it looked like an easy win. Two fast jets were chasing two slower jets over the open sea. But the British crews were not running away. They were flying very low over the North Sea. They did not fly high or make wild turns. They stayed calm and flew right above the waves, using the ocean to hide. The fastest fighters in the U.S. Navy were coming for them, but speed would not decide this battle. Welcome to Hidden Valor. The two British Buccaneer jets were already flying low when the alarm sounded on the American ship. Long before the American engine started, the British crews were racing against the sea. They flew at a steady speed. They stayed very low. Ocean spray hit their windows. They had finished their mission, and now they just had to survive. Back on the American ship, the deck crew worked fast. Two F-4 Phantoms launched into the air very quickly. The American radar saw the British planes. They looked like shadows moving on the water. The American controller told his pilots to cut them off before they reached the bad weather. Inside the British jet, the navigator looked back. He saw the fighters coming. The pilot kept his eyes on the horizon. He did not speed up. He did not climb high. Speed would use up their fuel. Going high would let the radar see them. Their only goal was to disappear. The sea ahead was gray and full of clouds. The light was bad, which made it hard to see. The British flew even lower down to 90 feet above the water. They were hiding where the radar could not see them well. The American pilots climbed high at first, then pushed their noses down to hunt. The lead pilot said he had targets on radar. But as they got closer to the water, the radar picture got fuzzy. The waves confused the radar. The Americans had to look with their own eyes. They flew down to 1,000 feet, searching the gray water for gray planes. Inside the second British jet, the navigator saw the Phantoms closing in. The distance was 20 miles. The pilot did not panic. Instead of flying straight, he turned gently to the north. This changed the angle of the chase without using extra speed. The Americans came closer to 15 miles. They could not get a lock with their missiles. They flew faster and lower, trying to see the British jets against the shining water. The British pilot saw the Americans first. They were two silver dots shining in the sunlight. Now the chase was very dangerous. At this low height, any mistake would be fatal. The British pilot prepared his plan. There was a wall of thick clouds 10 miles ahead. This was their escape door. The American pilot tried to cut them off. He thought he had them trapped. But the British were flying toward the weather and toward blindness. The sea rushed under them. They flew at 90 feet, not for safety, but to stay invisible. Flying higher meant being seen. Flying lower meant crashing into the water. The American pilot took a risk. He flew down to 800 feet, then 600 feet. He saw nothing but white waves. Then for half a second, he saw two shapes flash silver against the dark water. He saw them. The American planes dove down fast. They turned on their afterburners for extra speed. They closed the distance very quickly. The British navigator saw the burst of speed behind them. He told the pilot, but his voice was calm. The pilot did not speed up yet. This was a trap. At low altitude, the fast American planes could not turn as well as the slower British planes. The American leader got very close, under 6 miles. The wind shook his plane violently. He tried to corner the British jets. That was the moment the British made their move. The first jet turned left gently. The second jet waited 5 seconds and then followed. This split them up and confused the American pilots. From above, the two gray dots separated. The Americans were confused. Then the British jets vanished into the wall of clouds. The visibility dropped to almost zero. Inside the clouds, a British pilot rolled the jet on its side. The wind tossed them around, but they were in control. They came out of the clouds and split up in 2 different directions. The American planes flew blindly into the clouds seconds later. They saw nothing on radar. They saw nothing with their eyes. They had lost contact. The silence grew in the American cockpit. The danger was not over for the British. They needed to get home. They flew at 100 feet and sped up just a little bit to get away. The Americans were still burning, fuel looking for them above the clouds. They searched in circles but found nothing. Finally, the American controller admitted the targets were lost. The Phantoms were running out of fuel. They had to return to their ship. The controller never said the word escape, but everyone knew what happened. Far to the west, the British planes were still not safe. The flight home was long and hard. Flying low used a lot of fuel. The navigator calculated they would land with only 8 minutes of fuel left. That was very dangerous. But they had to stay low to stay hidden. The hours passed slowly. The excitement turned into a long test of endurance. They watched their fuel gauges closely. Eventually, the sky turned dark, and they climbed up to 5,000 feet. The radar was clear. They were free. They landed quietly at their base in Scotland. There were no cameras or headlines. The two tired jets landed with almost empty fuel tanks. The ground crew looked worried when they saw how little fuel was left. The pilots climbed out slowly. Days later, the officers reviewed what happened. The math showed the truth. The Americans chased them the way the rule book said to. But the British did not run by the book. The British pilot said simply that being low does not mean being slow. It means being invisible. After that day, the rules of air combat changed. They learned to look lower and be more careful. The British crew did not win a battle, but they rewrote the rules. They proved that courage and skill were more important than just having a fast plane. The Americans analyzed the chase. They realized that speed let them see the enemy, but smart flying let the enemy survive. For the British crew, the memory was personal. They remembered the vibration of the jet and the ocean rushing by. The maintenance chief looked at the salt on the plane and said they were flying a submarine, not a jet. The lesson was clear. Do not chase where the enemy runs. Chase where he must be. Back at the base, the British pilot told his navigator that they did not outrun the Americans. They simply refused to play their game. And in that space between the waves and the radio's silence, the Buccaneers vanished into legend.